Paul Hutchinson. Many people know me as primary investor and executive producer behind a movie called The Sound of Freedom. Led over 70 undercover child rescue missions in 15 countries, seen the darkest that humanity has to offer. It ended up being the largest child rescue mission in one day ever, over 120 children. That experience completely transformed my life. I'm sitting there on this chair around this table, and this trafficker brings out these 4 kids. Now, this is kind of hard for people to listen to, but I think it's important for people to know how dark the world goes so that we can do something to fix it. So I could see eye level into her soul, and all I could see was darkness. And I'm like, how is this okay anywhere? Anywhere in the world, how is this okay? I made a commitment at that moment that I would dedicate my life to eradicating that evil. That's what I attribute a lot of my success in my business career to, is learning how to truly trust that quiet voice of truth that we all have access to.
If you could, just introduce yourself for us, Paul, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
High level, Paul Hutchinson. Many people know me as a primary investor and executive producer behind a movie called The Sound of Freedom. Besides that, I had a very successful career, had a company in my early 20s that helped people overcome anxiety, depression, PTSD addiction, sold that for $20 million when I was 29 years old, started investing in real estate, invested in, I realized I need to hire a guy smarter than me, else I'd lose all my money. So I put together a great team with John Pennington, co-founder of Bridge Loan Capital, which ended up being Bridge Investment Group. I retired almost a decade ago with about 4,000 employees. We now have, and at the time we had about $20 billion in assets under management. Today we have almost $50 billion. I'm still an owner, still a founder, but I focus full-time on philanthropy. Led over 70 undercover child rescue missions in 15 countries. We can talk about why I was recruited to do that, seen the darkest that humanity has to offer, and now focus full-time on healing, helping people break free of the things that are just creating all this toxicity in their life, and run the Child Liberation Foundation, which helps eradicate child trafficking globally.
Very nice. Impressive, man. Impressive. So the focus on healing is healing specifically as it relates to abuse that children have faced? Or?
That's kind of where it started.
Okay.
In the beginning, I had a lot of undercover operators who already had a lot of PTSD from, 300 missions in Afghanistan and, working as a Green Beret. And they already had a lot of heavy energy. And then going undercover and seeing a menu with children and the things that they would do for what prices and whatnot it would send their PTSD over the top. So, that's where we started getting back into the healing work in helping them break free of their PTSD, then realizing some of the tools that we use that we can talk in depth later. These tools were something that we then started helping women who had been abused as children. 10, 20 years worth of therapy weren't helping them. And so we use some of these modalities. And then today we work exclusively with what I call the tip of the umbrella. These are world leaders and influencers, royalty, et cetera, because if we can help them learn how to break free of everything that doesn't serve them, everything from anxiety and depression and ego issues, addictions, which almost everybody's got some in some way, or PTSD and childhood trauma, if we can help them break free of that and learn to lead from a place of the heart, then we can create a massive ripple effect. Now, beyond that, we build safe houses for children. We have certification programs helping change laws, policies. That's all through the foundation. That's separate from the healing retreats that we help adults work through their shit, so to speak.
Nice. Love it. Impressive. And so how, you had a very successful career, obviously. You could have done anything after you kind of walked away from being full-time at your business. Why did you decide to do what you do?
Well, the story, Matt, goes back to my early 20s. I had a mentor. He said, Paul, the average person donates about 2% of their annual income to charity. He said, ultra wealthy families, not just millionaires. We're talking decamillionaires, centimillionaires, billionaires, et cetera. He said typically that number is upwards of 10, 15, even 20% that they're donating to making the world a better place. He said there's a synergy there. He said this isn't a religious issue, but he said, whether you're Muslim or Jewish or Christian, he said that the last book in the Old Testament says, "Prove me now herewith if I will not open you the windows of heaven, that there will not be room enough to receive it." And he's talking about charity, about at least a tithe or 10% of everything that you bring in to making the world a better place. He said, make that decision today. This is back when I was broke. I was 22 years old. I'm earning $2,000 a month, if that, right? He said, make that decision today and your road to success will be so much easier. And I told him, I said, you know what? That's why I want to be successful, so that I can be charitable. I never realized that I should be charitable so that I could be successful. You can call it God, you can call it karma, call it the universal law of exchange, call it whatever you want to. There's a higher power very interested in us doing good and rewards us because of that. So back in my early 20s, I started getting very involved in charity work. I didn't want to give money to a guy on the street. I used to a lot, the guy on the street asking me for drug money, but I think I was contributing to an existing problem. So I decided to focus on what I considered the truly innocent, a child in a position completely outside of any decisions that she made. So I served on the many boards of different charities. I was on the Make-A-Wish board of directors in our area for about 7 years. I was the incoming chairman for Make-A-Wish, helping kids with life-threatening illnesses when I got a call that changed my life. I was already helping to fund some operators who were rescuing some children from the unthinkable, from human trafficking. And they were in Colombia. I got a call from one of the operators. And he said, Paul, I'm here in Cartagena. There's not just 20 kids. There's more than 50. There's more than 100 in the surrounding areas. He had this plan that he could rescue all these kids at the same time. This plan involved having somebody come down to negotiate a multi-million-dollar real estate transaction. Now, at the time, I was running a very successful real estate investment fund. He knew more about my background than most people. I have, some skills from some training that makes me somewhat safe in a dangerous place. But more important than that, he needed somebody who could, wear a nice shirt, a nice watch, and negotiate a multi-million-dollar deal. The head trafficker had a piece of property that he wanted to develop into a child brothel sex resort. He believed he could make tens of millions of dollars selling his victims to wealthy Americans. And so the plan was, I would tell him, listen, I'll fund your project under one condition. We're going to have a party. You're going to bring all of your existing inventory, and you call all the other guys that you know in the area who have product like that, and if I'm happy with what I see, I'll fund your project. And Matt, it ended up being the largest child rescue mission in one day ever that I knew of at the time. It was over 120 children, and that experience completely transformed my life in every way.
So what? How did you get the kids out? Like, what was the experience like? Well,
the first day I flew in, I didn't know what to expect. I'm thinking, these are traffickers are going to have earrings in their noses and tattoos on their necks. And, these guys were businessmen, clean cut, polo shirt. The next one was a beautiful woman. She, if people have seen the movie Sound of Freedom, she was running a modeling agency. And I thought, these guys aren't traffickers. And I realized over time that absolutely, that common thread with almost all of them wasn't tattoos and earrings. The common thread was arrogance and greed and lust and addictions and all of these negative energies that we sadly see pervasive in our world. And we negotiated this deal. I told him, listen, I'll fund your project. We're going to have a party in a couple of weeks. Our team went and met with the U.S. Embassy, the Colombian federal agents. They provided 40 agents for us, 4 of them were our maids, 4 of them were our waiters, 4 of them were our cooks. You know, they're not very good cooks, but they're armed. And 25 of them were there to storm the party at the right time. And these guys showed up in Cartagena. We had 3 separate cities at the same time: Cartagena, Medellin, and Armenia. Total over 120 kids. In Cartagena, where I was 54 children. And seeing these kids, this was the first time I had ever seen what I knew was, the darkest part of humanity. And that was...
How old were these kids?
Ages 11 to 18.
Wow.
A lot of them were taken from other countries. We put them in a separate part of the house because they're already traumatized enough. We don't want them seeing the guns and the money changing hands and whatever. And we're negotiating this. We're sitting at this table with these traffickers. We have undercover cameras so that we can capture everything they say. So they can't later say, oh, I thought it was a pool party. No, you said on camera, this is why these kids were there. This is where you got them. This is what you're charging, et cetera, et cetera. So we're sitting there and we once we had all the information, we're supposed to order tequila. That was our sign for the waiters to go and radio and have the special force guys come in and storm the party. Well, we ordered the tequila. They were supposed to come within 2 or 3 minutes. Nothing happened. And ordering tequila, the traffickers were like, oh, yeah, well, this is time for the party to start. So one of them takes out the cocaine. One of them goes in to get the kids. We're like, shoot, we can't, And you could hear some of the kids crying. I mean, this is heavy stuff. And I'm sitting there on this chair around this table, and this trafficker brings out these 4 kids. Now, this is kind of hard for people to listen to, but I think it's important for people to know how dark the world goes so that we can do something to fix it, right? So he said, these are 0 kilometer miles is what he said. You can figure out what that means, right? There was an 11-year-old boy. There was an 11-year-old girl. This little girl standing in front of me, Matt, was no taller than I was as I was sitting down. So if you can imagine, here we're sitting, this child. And so I could see eye level into her soul. And all I could see was darkness. And I'm like, oh. I said, how is this okay anywhere in the world? How is this okay? And I took her little hands and I made a commitment at that moment, looking into her eyes, that I would dedicate my life to eradicating that evil from this. The most beautiful moment was after the agents came and stormed the party, arrested all of us. The bad guys think that we got extradited to the U.S. to stand trial, and 30 Child Protective Services people came in with the kids, and they started laughing, they started singing, and that singing, that laughing, that sound of freedom was the most beautiful sound that I ever heard. That's why we named the movie Sound of Freedom. That's why we named the book that's coming out this month called The Sound of Freedom. And I turned to the operator that was with me and I said, I spent my whole life making money, making rich people richer. I want to make a difference. I want to help. What can I do? And he said, Paul, sadly, there's a huge percentage of the demand for this that comes from guys like Jeffrey Epstein and his clients. It's big egos, big arrogance, big money. He said they walk and talk and dress like you. He said, I can't teach my Navy SEALs how to have that aura. He said, if you're willing to be the bait, I'll change your whole life. And so that was the beginning of 10 years of leading and being a key part in a bunch of child rescue missions. And we knew we couldn't take millions of people to see what we had seen. It was super dark, but we could help millions of people feel what we had felt. And now the movie, my foundation is the Child Liberation Foundation. Through my foundation and others that we have helped to fund and start, over 7,000 victims are now back with their families.
Wow.
But beyond that, there's estimated over 70 million people who have seen the movie Sound of Freedom. It became the #1 independent film in the world 2 years ago. And hundreds of millions of children are safer now because of that film, the awareness, the laws that we've helped to change, the certification programs, and me and other operators out speaking and sharing what we saw so that we as humanity can come together and say, no, that's a dark subject. I don't want to hear it. I applaud the audience who hung on this long. We'll talk about the light now, but we have to understand what's going on so that we can fix it, so that this isn't a problem, so there isn't 12 million children in this situation around the world.
Right. Amazing. Yeah. Incredible work. Thank you for what you do and what you've done. Yeah, that's huge. So the movie came out a couple of years ago, and that story is in the movie. And so you've kind of told that, and you said that you've done how many dozens
70
of it? 70 total missions. Just you specifically have gone in.
I personally have served on 70 missions.
Wow.
Now, I didn't do all the work. We had lots of operators that were there, but I was either played a key role or led over 70 missions in 15 countries over a period of 10 years. I quit my job. I thought, you know what, there's nothing in, after I had seen it firsthand, I thought, this is my calling. This is what I got to do. This is too dark for me to just sit back and live the life that I was living. I have to do something.
And what does your book get into that was not covered in the movie?
A lot.
Yeah. Okay.
So, the movie was simply awareness. It was showing the missions themselves. And in the book, I do talk about the rescue mission on the island in Colombia. I do talk about some other missions, including with some team members going in as doctors in a jungle. That was actually in Haiti that we did that, and some other things. However, the whole first section of the book teaches parents what to do to keep their kids safe. I call it the making of an undercover operator, but really it's learning situational awareness. It's learning what signs to look for when kids are in distress. It's learning how to build your life in a way where you can contribute and make an impact in the lives of others, et cetera. So, a lot of tools that parents can take away, besides just taking them through the emotional journey that me and the other operators went through in fighting trafficking. And then the last part of the book, the last 5 or 6 chapters, is all about liberating humanity. What does that look like? How do we make it so that our kids, our grandkids, our great-grandkids don't ever have to have this conversation, right? How do we elevate global consciousness? How do we take people out of this toxicity that is making this a thing anywhere at any time, right? How do our children should be our most valuable thing in our entire world, everything. So what do we need to do to resolve our own trauma so that we don't pass on any kind of toxicity in any way to our kids? How do we clean the system? How do we help people who are starting to go down a road where they might hurt another human being? What does that look like?
Love that. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's got to feel like it's going to be so difficult to fix this thing and to make a dent in it by, one raid after the next. It's really that global consciousness and that ability to change people at the global level, or to change the fact that it's happening in the first place, and kind of where that comes from and where that stems from. So what does your book get into as it relates to that component of it and kind of fixing the problem, not raid by raid, but globally? You're
so right on that raid by raid thing. I realized after 10 years of this work that really we were just fighting fire with fire, right? And when you're fighting fire with fire, something already got burned. And in this case, it was kids. Right? We don't want to go there. We want to prevent it before it ever happens. And so, I talk about in my early 20s, even before that, in my high school years, I was asked to be the president of what they called the peer leadership team that helped kids with everything from domestic abuse to drug and alcohol abuse, addictions, things like if kids in their, teenage years or junior high school years or whatnot, if they go and talk to a teacher about some abuse going on in the home, legally that teacher has to go to the authorities. So a lot of times, and plus the kids sometimes they don't want to talk to some adult about their stuff. So we were trained as peer counselors to be able to be in a position where those kids could talk to an older peer. And in doing so, that's when I came to understand, wow, this is a problem that is going on everywhere. This isn't just, with the undercover work, we were focusing on child trafficking and abducted kids and kids that were, being sold outside their homes, et cetera. However, the number is staggering when you understand what's going on in our own neighborhoods. Literally half of all women that we know have been a victim of sexual violence at some time in their life, right? 1/4 of all women that we know, it was as a child. It was under 18 years old. For men, it's a little bit less. 1 in every 5 of us at some time in our life. However, even them, 1/4 of them, it was under the age of 10 years old in their own homes. And so the reality is we need to have a relationship with our kids. People will leave Sound of Freedom. They're like, I want to do something. I want to go do rescue missions. Yeah, the worst thing you can do is go to Mexico and go try to rescue kids, right? You're going to get arrested. You're probably going to get shot, right? The best thing you can do is go home and hug your children. And people are like, well, how does that help? Well, the majority of children that are being moved around and taken don't come from a healthy home. They come from runaways or a broken home or a broken foster care program because they're an easier target. Now, the ones in our own homes, in the quote, the healthy homes, so we think, those ones are at risk, not outside and being taken. They're at risk by a familial person, okay? So we need a relationship with our kids where they can very comfortably come to us and say, hey, Dad, hey, Mom, I don't like it when you tell me to hug Uncle Harry. He touches me weird, and he says we should have secrets outside of you. Or I don't like this babysitter. She's showing us pornography. She says we should trust her more than you. Or this friend's house. I went there the other day, and her brother, he took pictures of us when we're changing. Now he says he's going to use them around the school. These are grooming behaviors. And beyond that, this is super important, especially in today's age. Just within the last couple of years, this has skyrocketed. It's something called sextortion online, where you need to be the 911 for your kids. Your 13-year-old daughter, your 12-year-old daughter needs to feel very comfortable coming to you and saying, hey, Dad, I screwed up. I was chatting online with this boy that he said he was 13, and he sent me some pictures of him, and I sent him some pictures of me, and now he wants some videos, and now he wants us to meet somewhere. It's probably not a 13-year-old boy. It's probably a 40-year-old boy, right? And that is posing online and using this extortion method to be able to get kids to do more and more and step outside of where they were outside of where they were supposed to be, So us being the 911 for our kids when things like that happen is vitally important. Now, beyond that, understanding how many kids have gone through this, 92% of those of kids who have gone through sexual abuse, it was a family member, it was a neighbor, it was somebody that parents know that they should have been able to trust, but they didn't. And in doing so, it creates some major, heavy, heavy trauma. And this is the trauma that comes out our whole life. It comes out in anxiety and depression and worry and what if thinking, negative self-talk, and it comes out in addictions. And in some cases, it becomes what I call trauma transfer. It is the passing on of that trauma in the form of physical, verbal, or even sexual abuse of a child. And so in those cases, if we can help humanity heal from that, if we can understand what to be looking for, what the signs are with the kids, and help them to heal, then we can create a society where we don't have this trauma being passed on to others.
Yeah, I love that for sure. And to double click on a couple of components of that, maybe we start with being the 911 for your family and for your kids, and creating a safe place so that they know that they can come to you and talk to you about what's really happening in their life and what they're seeing. And, I guess that most parents feel like, oh yeah, I do everything. Of course, little Johnny is okay to talk to me. Of course, but their son, Johnny sometimes is not feeling that. He's feeling He's feeling as if he's being judged. He's feeling a combative kind of a relationship with his parents, and they're the last person that he feels like he can talk to about something like that. So what advice would you give parents in order to help create a safe place for their children so that the child knows that they can talk to their parents about this kind of stuff?
A really, really just open, honest conversation and saying, listen, these are the dangers that are out there. And if something happens, even if you screw up on something, I want you to know that you are loved unconditionally, unconditionally. And have honest, people are like, I don't want to really have the sex conversation with my kids, until they're, start dating, guess what? The average age of a child that is brought into sexual exploitation, the average age is 12. Right? That's average. So if we're waiting until they're older, there's a chance that there could be some things going on there. And so, and here's the thing too, if your 12, 13-year-old daughter, she was really, really outgoing, she's got friends and everything, and all of a sudden she turns into just a recluse. A lot of parents are like, oh, it must just be, she's going through puberty right now, and so that's her emotional changes. No, there's probably other things that are going on too. And so asking honest, probing questions that are more than just yes or no questions, and having, so many parents, they think that they're spending quality time with their kids, but really they're just sitting watching TV. They're not having healthy conversations. Everybody's on their phones during dinner. There's not that traditional opportunity every day during dinner, during time after school, et cetera, to actually sit down and have a loving, open conversation. I would say, hey, you know what? At least once a week, take your kids to dinner somewhere, have them at home, and say, okay, we're leaving all of our cell phones in the car for this dinner that we're going to, all of them. We're just going to leave them there. We're just going to go have a wonderful dinner, and we're going to talk about stuff. So super important.
Love it. Yeah. I love that unconditional love. As I was kind of framing the question, I was thinking that creating an environment of non-judgment really for a child, is such an important, it creates such a healthy dynamic between parent and child. Most parents feel like they're playing a role of parent, and they feel like they need to, as opposed to parenthood as a function, it's a role, and it's role playing, and they feel as if they need to judge their child, and that is going to influence the child's behavior. If I judge them negative, they're doing something bad, they're doing something wrong, then I can influence the way that they'll act in the future, and so they'll know not to do this. In reality, it's a very dangerous way to raise your child. If you can have acceptance and love and compassion for your child and talk about these things, as you say, and talk about the dangers that exist, but create an environment that's non-judgmental, then that's really a great way to connect with your child and to again create that safe place, so that when something weird does happen in their life, something unexpected, something like some of the things that you've mentioned already, it's a safe place. They know that their parent is a friend. It's not a parental figure that's going to judge them. It's someone that they can confide in, and that they can tell their secrets to. They can tell their truth to, and have these deep, meaningful conversations that can change lives. So
true, so true.
Yeah.
And you've hit on something that is a deep, deep subject. We go on for hours on is how shame, guilt, and judgment is so pervasive in our society. And it's something that sadly keeps people really, really stuck, keeps them stuck in their addictions, their self-loathing. There's the majority of men who are watching us right now either currently have or have at some time in their recent history had addictions to things like pornography, right? And when you're in this self-loathing energy, and when you're looking at yourself as something less than the divine that's in you, and you're looking at a woman as anything less than the divine feminine that she is, you start going down this dark road that feeds into that negative energy. And so yes, I think it's so important that we help our kids realize that we love them unconditionally. Release that judgment. Listen, you when you made that decision, you were in a place where you didn't have all the knowledge that you have right now. So let's work on getting you the extra knowledge that you need to be able to live life in a way that's going to bring you true joy and happiness.
Yeah, I've got maybe a more challenging question, and it has to do with the religious component of this that exists, and like we talk about that most of the abuse that happens when it's someone that's close to you, and it's a family member, and it's not necessarily you're being trafficked and you're being stolen from your home, but in a lot of cases it's someone close to you. But in a lot of cases that happens within a church or some religious institution, and I just you think about the belief of I will be forgiven when I die, and this is up to God. And when you kind of go down that path, it becomes less about the action that you're taking and more about I'm human, I sin, and I can ask God for forgiveness on my deathbed, and I can confide in Jesus, and all will be forgiven. And so I feel like this is just such a critical part of the conversation, and understanding this component of, I'm sure you've seen it where people are using God to justify their actions, and knowing that, hey, I'm going to be okay. And so how do you what are your thoughts on that dynamic that exists between the religious component and the phenomenon, the abuse itself?
We can go deep on this one because I
Yeah.
think you and I are very aligned. So first of all, a few interesting statistics. There is significant evidence that, in fact, I'll even point out a few of them, that in highly conservative religious environments, that the percentage of people who are addicted to pornography and child pornography goes up, not down, because in that subjugation of conversations about sexuality, et cetera, and that guilt and that shame, et cetera, feeds into those addictions, and those addictions end up progressing to not just watching it with your girlfriend, but going down a dark road where you're in this shame and guilt and loathing, et cetera. And now you're looking at bestiality things and rape videos and kids, et cetera, et cetera. And it's happening a lot. It's creating this tsunami of demand for these things. And so people think, oh, in the super conservative religious areas, then we're not going to have these problems. No, it's actually worse. It is. And we've all seen it with a lot of the major churches of the world where, these religious zealots are the ones who are the perpetrators in a lot of cases, and they're trying to hide it. And you're exactly right. You're exactly right, where it's this mentality of on my deathbed, I can accept Jesus as my savior, and my entire life of sin is washed away. And people are like, well, don't wait till the very end. What if you die halfway through? Most people don't die suddenly. They die when they're older, and so they justify where they are. No, that's not. Every single day contains eternity in it today. We need to take a look at the life that we're living right now, and not trying to fix ourselves out of a place of separation from God. This is where a lot of people go wrong, is they think that there's some place way out there, and we're already separated. We already were separated because of the sins of Adam and Eve or whatever else, and that cut us off from God, and we have to somehow, in our unworthiness, try to get back to. Guess what? That vision of us in our unworthiness is just like any kind of when you have a vision board and you're trying to visualize the life that you're creating, the business you're creating, et cetera. You want to step into that and feel it as if it's already there. And that's what helps you create that in your life. And we can go down how I helped create some successful companies and everything else through that visualization, that manifestation, et cetera. Well, if we're visualizing and manifesting a separation from our creator, if we're seeing ourselves as sinful, as we're seeing ourselves as somebody that should be living in guilt and shame, no wonders we're bringing this energy back into our life over and over again.
Yeah, it's one of those dynamics that's always been. I mean, I want to say that the Catholic Church has paid $3 billion in reparations to people over the last 50 or so years for this abuse, and it feels like it's been it's it seems to be more of a silencing and we're going to deal with it internally and don't worry about it kind of a thing, as opposed to like getting to the real nature and the real root of it, and fixing it. Like to your point early on about like it needs to be a global change of consciousness. And to do that, you need transparency. You've got to bring the issue to the light. You've got to talk about it, which is what you're doing and why what you're doing is so incredible. And not only talking about it, but taking action. But yeah, I mean, what do you think they need to do in order to get that component of the child sexual abuse problem under control? Like, what could the church do?
My answer is not going to make a lot of people happy. Understand this, people ask me, Paul, are you Christian? My answer is, in the purest sense of the word, the real teachings of Yeshua, yes. Everything that's been completely changed and bastardized over the last 2,000 years, no. In fact, I wrote the book Sound of Freedom. Now, I'm writing one called Compassionate Conscious Capitalism that talks about leading business from a place of the heart. That'll be done in a few months. Then I have one called Are You Listening? With my hand on my heart, which is, we can talk in depth on that. But in a few years, I'm going to write one that's going to piss everybody off, called 10,000 Years of Deceit, talking about how political leaders and religious leaders decided they were going to manipulate humanity for their own lust for power and greed, et cetera, right? And it's happened for thousands of years, keeping us in a place of judgment, keeping us in a place of division. There are so many things that you can read into what is canonized scripture for a lot of churches that tells you why they're having the problems that they're having. Right? So it goes way deeper than just policy changes today. It really does. It goes into humanity really learning to tune in and find out where they came from. This is why, in my book, All You're Listening, this is super powerful here. I'm just going to touch on this. So years ago, I met a guy by the name of Jerry Prine. Jerry never graduated from elementary school. He couldn't read or write. Yet he was the inventor of countless medical life-saving devices. He was the inventor of the original software for voice recognition that your Siri is built off of, right? That IBM's original version was developed by him. Yet he couldn't read or write, never graduated from elementary school. He was tested at the University of Utah's, the highest IQ at the time they had ever tested, one of the highest in the world. I went to lunch with Jerry, and he said, Paul, you could have an IQ over 200 if you wanted. I said, no, I'm really not that smart. Right? I worked really hard for my grades and I didn't even get a scholarship. And he said, no, he says that and I said, I don't think you can change your IQ, can you? He said, well, the difference between me and you is that I listen better than you. I said, you listen better than me? I touched my ear. He said, no, I listen better than you. And he touched his heart. He said, do you think that I'm the inventor of those medical devices? I said, you have the patents, right? He goes, yeah, I do. I said, you're not the inventor? He goes, no, I'm not. I'm like, what, you stole them? He says, well, kind of. He said, how long has the universe been around? I said, millions of years. He said, billions upon billions of years. He said, those medical devices were invented billions of years ago. I was a better listener than you. And he touched his heart again. And I still didn't quite understand. He said, Paul, you need to understand that we live in a world of universal truth. And so many things are hidden from us by our governments. Things are hidden from us by our doctors, by our religious leaders. There's so many things that are hidden from us. And he said the human body has the ability. He says we're like a massive radio transmitter and receiver. He said there's something within our brain. It's called our pineal gland that's little teeny tiny crystals. He says that the crap they've been putting in our water, this fluoride and stuff, is actually calcifying them on purpose. Why? So that we don't have the ability to transmit and receive. He said those old radios with the radio transistors, you tune them in just right, and you can get the radio signal of whatever your favorite station is, right? He said our brains are that same way. But we have all of this mush that's in there, that's just chatter that's stopping us from tuning in. He said most people discount their intuitions because they know not from where they came. They believe that they came from the books they read and the people they talked to. He said if you realize that they're coming from a place of infinite truth that you can literally access. There are people who channel, there's people who connect with Ra, there's people that all over that are able to connect with people anywhere around the universe and receive those direct transmissions. He says, but we sit here and think that, oh, that doesn't exist. He said there are countless musical works of art that were written note perfect the first time, because they were already written. Nikola Tesla, Einstein, others, all of them talk about tapping in to a universal truth. You can call it God, you can call it whatever you want to, and we are all universally connected. Once we understand that oneness of all of us, we're not going to a child, we're not going to steal from our neighbor. All of this stuff isn't going to happen when we step into that understanding of that divine oneness that we all have. So anyway, this is a longer conversation, but in doing so, I started following this. That's what I attribute a lot of my success in my business career to, is learning how to truly trust that quiet voice of truth that we all have access to. And so anyway, that's a lot of mumbo jumbo going around.
No, it's
but
brilliant
it's
and beautiful.
Being confused by all of this dogma that's just pounding into our head from writings and teachings of people who don't have our best interest in mind. They really don't.
Yeah, are you familiar with the Schumann Resonance?
Yeah, very much.
Yeah,
so.
okay. So, I mean, that could very legitimately be, I mean, when you're talking about being connected to something greater than ourselves, if you're thinking about it in terms of like a universal, then I think quantum entanglement becomes more, likely of an explanation. But when you're talking about being connected on this earth, the Schumann resonance definitely makes a lot of sense in terms of just the fact that there's been light that has been bouncing up and down on the earth. The light contains information, and it's been bouncing up and down on the earth for hundreds of millions of years. And so all of the knowledge that the earth has ever had and is contained within the Schumann resonance. I mean, it's fascinating that, and when people are able to connect to that realm in order to connect to that, and yeah, I mean, it's you can. That's where creativity comes from. That's if you can really let go and connect with that. That's where you can create all kinds of new, incredible inventions that may or may not already be new. But it's the collective ideas of the collective consciousness that has existed from this point in time all the way into the far past in human history.
So true.
Yeah.
What's funny is I actually did my meditation last night listening to the 532 hertz, the Schumann resonance of the earth, because when I go from my beta, we're in beta state right now, just in our conscious mind talking, down into alpha, down into a theta state in a deep meditation. I teach these at our retreats of how to get right down into that meditative state where you can receive clear direction and creativity coming in from all directions. And so the frequency that I use to keep myself out of my conscious mind into my superconscious is that. In fact, this is interesting too.
Is it 432 or 532?
Well, so there's 432 hertz. There's in fact, I'll show you on my phone when we're all done. I'll actually send you some of my playlists. You'll love these ones, right? So the one I was listening to last night was actually titled Schumann Resonance. It was a 5-something. There was the 432 that the music was changed back in World War II by the Nazis to try to create anxiety and depression and push the entire musical system into something that is not in sequence. with harmonious living, etc. So that's the 432 hertz. People can start going down that rabbit hole and starting researching those. But there are different types of meditation frequencies that can help get your brain into that theta state. And so, you've got your conscious mind, which is just a teeny little sliver. This is what we're using to communicate right now, etc. Our subconscious mind contains everything, like everything that we've ever experienced. Literally every single red light you've ever stopped at your entire life, your subconscious mind knows how many there are, right? Knows how many steps you've taken your entire life. There's a book that I have some of our undercover operators read called The Gift of Fear. And in The Gift of Fear, it talks about the importance of listening to that intuition that's coming in. And the reason behind it is that chances are your peripheral, way out of some corner of your eye, you saw some guy as you were walking into the restaurant that was wearing a heavy coat in a hot day and it was out of place, but your conscious mind didn't pick up on it. And so your subconscious, even, you're having a conversation with one of your potential business partners. Your subconscious mind knows how many times his pupils dilated when you were talking, picking up potential lies in his conversation, where your conscious mind has no idea. So learning to trust those things is super important because there's massive amounts of data that's there in your subconscious. But just as massive as your subconscious database is compared to your conscious mind, the superconscious is infinitely more. It's what you were talking about. It's that every bit of information that's bouncing through, that's contained within the light particles that have been here since the beginning of time, not only within this earth, but literally throughout the entire cosmos. The ether itself is filled with this intelligence, and all of that intelligence is accessible to us. It really is. But we have to be able to get beyond our conscious mind, beyond our subconscious mind, and into that super conscious awareness. And in doing so, we literally can have access to everything. In fact, this is why I was told in my meditations to teach people how to listen. This is why my next book is called Are You Listening? Because with my hand on my heart, because I believe that as soon as humanity learns how to effectively meditate and drop in, that they will come to the same truths that you and I have. See, here's the problem. This is kind of funny. So the average Christian, okay, and don't take me. I've prayed my whole life, but what is the way that most people pray? We've been taught to pray. Praise, praise, praise. God is good. God is great. God is good. God is great. And sorry. Oh, please forgive me for this. I need to fix this, whatever. Fix. Please help me with this, et cetera, et cetera. And then boom, you hang up the phone. Can you imagine having a relationship with somebody's dating a new person? You're dating this girl, right? You call her up. You say, praise, praise, praise. Hey, man, you're gorgeous. You're just, oh man, holy crap, yours is so hot. Wow. And sorry. Hey, by the way, yeah, man, I accidentally crashed the car and, I cheated on you last week. Sorry about that. And fix. Hey, when you get home, can you clean the dishes and put this away? I forgot to do that. And hang up the phone with nothing else. That's not a conversation, not a relationship. Right, You're kidding me? Yeah. This is the relationship most people have with their creator, with God, right? Is this fix, sorry, and praise. That's all that it is. So people are like, oh, meditation, that's Eastern versus Western. That's not in line with my spiritual beliefs. No, it is the best way to tune in to that divine truth that everybody has access to, not only our conscious, subconscious, but that super conscious realm, that communication with intelligences everywhere outside of this plane here will give you so much more expansion in everything that you're doing.
Love it. Yeah, that's fantastic. No, phenomenal explanation. I guess the way, I think we're speaking the same language and we're completely aligned. I have slightly different words for it. I guess from a conscious mind standpoint, I view it more as the unconscious mind. I don't.
Yeah, exactly. We live pretty unconscious.
Yeah, we're for the most part unconscious, and then the subconscious I just view as our true self, our spiritual self. The energy that we are. But I think it's the exact same thing, and then connecting that the spirit that we are, the spirit energy that we are, with the the super consciousness through meditation is clearly, it's really where all creativity comes from. I think that really is praying. I think that is meditation is praying to a degree. I mean, we're connecting with the ether, with God, with
Source.
with source, right. So, yeah, no, it's good stuff, and I like the way that you see reality. I actually feel like there's this huge group of people that are awakening to this reality, and I think there's a number of reasons for that. When things get to a low point, it's often that's often counterbalanced by people reaching a higher point, and it feels like the world is in a pretty tough place right now. So it's kind of beauty to see the arising of a new consciousness as we kind of exit the age of Pisces and enter the new age. So. Yeah, it's, I guess, where do we even go from there? I think maybe a good segue to this might be your work that you're doing to help people heal, and that entire process. Maybe if you could just kind of educate us a little bit about what you're doing for trauma.
I would love that. So, quick history. Back in my early 20s, had a very successful company. We had 50,000 people a month calling in off of an infomercial to get help with what all of us deal with, different types of anxiety, depression, PTSD, addictions, childhood trauma, et cetera. And so I have a lot of history in understanding mental health in that space. Fast forward about 12 years ago, and it's important to understand the history here. 12 years ago, I wasn't Paul Hutchinson. I was Paul fucking Hutchinson. Right? I had built a huge company. I had way too much money for my age, and I was running my life into the hole, and to a huge one. I had a house with 10 bathrooms, 8 private suites, 3 kitchens, 7 fireplaces in my house. I had a basketball court in my basement. And I built on the edge of the basketball court, I built a stage, a DJ booth with massive, 84-inch televisions and stripper poles in the middle of my stage, right?
Right.
Yeah. Everybody goes, oh, I'd love that. No, I was a disaster. I was a disaster. And now,
you were more connected with your unconscious mind than you were connected with
every way, in every way. And remind me later to talk to you about the Merkaba, because this isn't the star, this isn't a Jewish symbol. This is something that predates all of it, and it kind of falls in line with where I ended up in my divine connection with my wife, with myself, with our Creator, with all of that stuff leading from a place of the heart, everything contained in what that means to me. So what happened was I got called to go do these undercover missions, and it fed into the problem. Yes, I was helping kids. Yes, I now had a purpose, but now I was rescuing kids on the weekend. I had the best panty dropper story in the planet, right? It was really toxic. And so we were blowing through our undercover operators. I have Green Berets, Navy SEALs with all of this PTSD already that couldn't handle doing undercover rescuing kids because it was just so negative energy. And I had 2 operators, Jimmy and Andy, who called me up on a call together. Jimmy had done 13 missions with me. Andy had done 22. They called me up and they said, Paul, do you trust us? And I said, yeah, I literally trust you with my life. We're in the missions. I'm in charge of talking. They're in charge of making sure I don't die. They said, you need to come to this healing retreat. I'm like, I don't need to heal. I'm Paul F. and Hutchinson. Everybody wants to be me. They're like, no, Paul, you're in your second marriage, headed for a divorce. Your kids don't even speak to you. You think that your happiness is going to come from one more girl in your bed, one more plane, one more. I had 2 helicopters. Who needs 2 helicopters? You can't even fly one by yourself. I was living this energy of just thinking that more stuff and more hedonistic lifestyle was going to make me happy, and it really wasn't. The only salvation I had in my life was the undercover work we were doing, helping the kids, but it just wasn't fixing what needed to be fixed deep inside, right? And so They said, this will be the most transformational experience of your life. I'm like, transformation. You can't say it's the most transformational. I've done transformational stuff. I've walked across coals with Tony Robbins right by my side. I've done transformational things. You can't tell. Matt, this was the most transformational experience of my life, bar none. What it was is that there was a doctor who was working on the proper use. This is so important. We'll talk about this. The proper use of psychedelics when it comes to trauma therapy, PTSD, addictions, childhood trauma, anxiety, depression, and in my case, an unmitigated ego, right? And so for me, my first experience, and this is with psilocybin, this is not just a little microdose. We're talking 3 to 6 grams, and there's 180 different strands of psilocybin. The facilitator, a guided meditation with breath work, facilitated experience, knowing the right strands and the right frequencies, the right music to put on, was 10, 20, 50x what somebody going to their friend's house and doing mushrooms can do, right? And so for me, what happened? Because the facilitator knew what I needed to work on and knew where I needed to go, the strand that she gave me, the music that was put on, was the most beautiful, horrific experience of my life. Horrific because Paul Hutchinson felt...
He died.
Yeah. Yeah, it was... And I died and went to hell. To hell. I felt pure empathy. I felt in every cell of my body, I felt the pain that my children felt when I cheated on their mom, as if I was them. And it was so heavy. It was so dark. It was like Satan himself was putting his foot on my chest and I was just bound to hell, right? And I couldn't even breathe. I was like 600 feet in the dirt, deep down with all this pressure, and the facilitator could tell I was having a hard time and switched the playlist from this frequency that was helping me feel all of this stuff to something that I could feel this light and love of the universe just pulling me out of this hole and all of this shit just coming off of me. And then I said to myself, Paul, have you learned your lesson yet? And I purposely changed the playlist back to that song that took me to hell on purpose. Boom, I went back down and I could feel the ripple effect of every one of my choices. I could feel the pain of the family that got broke up because some guy was at my party and slept with a cheerleader and his wife left him. And then I felt the ripple effect of that seeing forward and seeing, because there was not a father in the home and the daughter ends up getting raped or the son ends up getting on drugs and whatever, all of these ripple effects of the choices that I was making. And the guys at work that maybe I was speaking out of anger and yelling at, whatever it was, I could feel it. And then I could feel the joy of the kids that we had helped to rescue as if I was them. As if I was them. It was so beautiful. And the true oneness that we all truly are. That we're not separated by time or space or anything, that we are all part of this divine creation. It was so prevalent that it changed everything for me, everything. And so I then started looking. I thought, okay, I've heard that psychedelics, psilocybin is Schedule 1 drugs. It must be dangerous like cocaine. The truth is, psilocybin is safer than table sugar. There's never been a case of addiction. Not one, ever. Never been a case of overdose. And when used properly, now
or withdrawals, no addiction, no overdose, no withdrawals.
Exactly. Yeah. And now here's something important. I'm gonna explain the science in like 30 seconds so that the listener can understand this. So when we're kids, when we're 0 to 9, 10 years old, our brain is in a state of neuroplasticity, very, very impressionable. We can learn 3 or 4 languages at the same time when we're 3 or 4 years old, right? We can while we're learning how to walk and eat and all of these other things. And most of that stuff gets imprinted into our subconscious mind, where 95% of our life is controlled by that part of our self, not on our unconscious level. Right? It's controlled by that subconscious. And when we're driving our car, hitting the brake, hitting the gas, all of those things, After 9 or 10 years old, in order to have something imprinted down there into that part of our mind, takes about 21 days of consistent effort to create a new habit, right? If you imagine that you're building a concrete freeway, the freeway is out of concrete, right? And in the flowing state, nobody flattened it out. It was bumps and stuff everywhere. That's what happens in a lot of our life. Our subconscious mind, we've got all these bumps that we're going through in our life because, maybe our uncle touched us when we were 7, or maybe our dad told us that we didn't look good in that outfit. Whatever it was, these bumps are coming up and showing up in our life. And in order to break through those bumps, you got 21 days of chiseling. What if you could turn that entire freeway back into that flowing state again so that you can smooth it out properly this time? That, if you could take it back to that state of neuroplasticity, that's what happens with the psilocybin and the different psychedelics, is it creates a temporary state of neuroplasticity. Now, why this is important is that this is why it's actually dangerous. Not just not a good idea. It's dangerous to go do mushrooms with your friends at a rave party, right? Because if you got rap music going on over there, an orgy going over here, somebody yelling at their girlfriend over there, and your mind is in that state of neuroplasticity, very, very impressionable, and that stuff's going on, it's not helping, it's actually hurting you. Yet if you're in an environment, and we run these healing retreats, people can go to liberatinghumanity.com and get all kinds of information on the proper use of these tools. And but you go into the right environment with the right people, coming in with a clear intention of what you want to create, with the right music, with the right facilitators who can help work through it, you can get 10 and 20 years worth of therapy done in 1 or 2 days. So that's what we do now. We do 7-day, fully immersive, transformational healing experiences using different strains of psilocybin, and we use something called Combo and Bufo, which we can talk about. You're going to think I'm batshit crazy, but
no, I don't think so. But I'm not familiar with it though.
So we realized over time there's of the 76 retreats, the guided meditation facilitated experiences that we have done. I'm a master facilitator, as is my wife. My daughter became a shaman in the space, and of those, 12 of them have been ayahuasca. All of the rest of them have been using different types of psilocybin. Ayahuasca is super heavy for brand new people. It's more for people who need to break free of a heavy addiction to cocaine or heroin or pornography, heavy addiction to alcohol. Those things, the ayahuasca is really powerful, but it's holding a bucket and throwing up for 6 hours straight. Right? I mean, there's a lot, but it's important because you're physically purging a lot of that negativity, right? It's a physical attached to your mental purging. Mama Aya loops you through this addiction that you're trying to break free of and says, "You ready to let go? You ready to let go? We're gonna let go. We're gonna let go now." And you're throwing up from the bottom of your toes, right?
And is that consistent on the experiences, or is it
pretty? Most people throw up a lot.
Okay. Maybe
on the low end 5 times in a 5-hour experience. On the high end 50 times.
Wow.
So yeah, that's ayahuasca, and ayahuasca is from a vine in the Amazon jungle. I don't ever suggest that people do that as their first deep psychedelic experience.
Right.
You can get a lot more done. The psilocybin is more of a dance. A dance. You're driving. You and your facilitator are kind of working through the things that you want to do. If you're really hard-headed, or if you've got an addiction, you need to let somebody else drive, not you. And in this case, it's Grandma Ayahuasca, Grandmother Aya, and she's got a whip, and she's loving you through it, but she gets it done. Well, we were trying to figure out how to bring in some of that experience. Mama Aya has a little bit of DMT, and that's a really powerful tool. DMT is something that every living thing has it in some degree. We release a huge portion of it from our pineal gland, from our third eye, when we're born and when we die. Some people say that it's the crossover chemical between this realm and the next. In fact, when people have a near-death experience, right? You major car accident and you're on the operating table and you die, right? And then they come back. A lot of them, that near-death experience where they see God, they see the other side, they see all of these things, it's because their pineal gland actually thought they were dying and released a massive amount of DMT. And that DMT created this incredible experience. Well, the most potent in all of nature is something called 5-MeO-DMT, and it's actually contained in a resin that's on the back of a frog. It's not a poison. It is the most powerful psychedelic on earth, and it doesn't last 8 hours. It doesn't last 6 hours. It lasts 5 minutes, but it takes everything that you see as finite in your life and completely removes it. You will die. It is an ego death. It's not a physical death. It's a full ego death in the most profound way, more than any of the other psychedelics of anything. And
after one use,
just one time,
wow.
One time, and you don't know that you're out for 5 minutes. You have no idea if it was 5 hours, 5 days, 5 lifetimes. You have no idea. It is all limits are gone. You are not yourself in this body, in this time, in these minutes. You are nothing in nobody in no time, and then you are everything in everybody in every time, and you are connected, and all the things that we see as limits, our limited power, our limited resources, our limited time, our limited relationships with people who have passed on, etc. All of those limits get completely ripped away, and you are able to feel your own power, feel your connection with everyone, feel the infinite nature of space and time and everything else. And it's an incredibly powerful tool in helping people break free of all of those things that they thought were important in this 3D world, and come into this beautiful state of love and peace and ready for deep, deep inner healing. So we use that as part of our 7-day experience.
I think that one of the more impressive things about just listening to you talk about this is that it's often very difficult for people to find the words to use when describing these experiences from these medicines, and to adequately articulate what it feels like and what's actually going on. And then, of course, the scientific component of it, like what's actually happening with your brain. But you do a remarkable job of explaining the situation and the actual impacts on the brain and the experience itself, because the experience itself is very, very difficult for people to articulate. And feel like, there's not enough science that's occurred regarding the medicines yet in order to, I feel like make people comfortable with, diving in and having one of these experiences and potentially completely letting go of addiction, letting go of, alcoholism or pornography addiction or whatever it might be. The science just isn't really there yet. And it feels like, in the 60s, things were kind of heading that direction and people were experimenting and then, having these awakenings and having these changes happen to them. And then, just a hard cutoff and just, all drugs are bad, all drugs are equal, and not really distinguishing between a drug and a medicine. And for sure, you can party with, psilocybin or DMT, of course. You combine it with alcohol, you're partying with it. You're not using it as a transformational tool, but you can also use those things as transformational tools. And I guess that's the part that needs more science and more research. And are you keeping track of kind of what's happening on that front and what's going on as it relates to the research?
Absolutely. In fact, the reason there hasn't been very much research is the fact that it was a Schedule I drug.
Right.
The Nixon administration decided. And here's the thing: this is my own opinion, but I've got a lot of validation behind it. I truly believe that the demonization of these medicines in the late 60s was because humanity would not be able to be controlled the way that the
Right.
establishment wants to control them
sure.
if we were awakened, right? And so they couldn't allow that. You will, and anybody who goes to one of these deep experiences will become awakened, and they'll start recognizing, wow, wait a minute, this propaganda is meant for mind control. These doctors, this stuff is all. We are slaves. We are truly in a place where big pharma, big food, big government, big corporations, a lot of them that are trying to control our minds and our hearts are leading us down this road. Now, you and I both own big corporations. We're not talking about us. We're talking about the trillions of dollars that would be lost by big pharma if indeed humanity realized that we could grow our solution to our anxiety, depression, PTSD. We could grow it in our backyard, and they don't have any patented control over it, right? And so, a combination of this desire to make trillions of dollars in selling us these drugs that are keeping us slaves, combination of that and government control that doesn't want to have humanity be awakened the way that you are using these proper use of these things has made it so that they have outlawed even the study for the last 50 years. And it's just been recently where there's been like Johns Hopkins University has done some extensive studies for the last 10 years. And now just a few weeks ago, Texas put out $50 million in new money to start doing the studies of ibogaine and other different types of psychedelics when it comes to PTSD and trauma therapy, et cetera. So it's super exciting to see those things. In fact, there's people in the new administration that are saying, "Hey, you know what? We're gonna start breaking down those walls and opening it up so that they have the opportunity to decriminalize the use of these tools in different states as well." So yeah, there's the $50 million from the state of Texas to become a leader in psychedelics research. That was super exciting. That was
exciting.
just a couple weeks ago.
They need to add a couple more zeros to that, but that's
Yeah,
exciting.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, but good. Yeah. So I guess you've done such a wonderful job of articulating this, and I guess when we talk about awakening, and kind of getting into making that tangible and making that something that people can understand. I guess one of the core values that I attempt to practice on a daily basis is authenticity and kind of knowing my true self versus my false self. My who I truly am at my core, you would call the subconscious, I would call the spiritual self, versus my ego or versus my movie character, and kind of distinguishing between those two. I think that's one form of awakening, is the understanding of who we truly are and at our core. Is that something that you would agree with? And
In every way.
yeah, okay.
In every way. And it's a constant battle every day.
Yeah.
I'm the first one to admit that Paul Hutchinson pokes his head out every once in a while.
Of course.
Yeah. And
It's a practice.
I have to say, no. You know what? You're not defined by the girls you're with and your money you had and all this stuff. And even in the conversations, sometimes even our conversation today, I caught myself a couple times. I'm like, Paul, that's your ego poking out right there on the screen. There's your ego right there. And so it's something that is a constant focus in coming into that spiritual self and releasing that ego self.
Well, it's a challenge because we have to use our minds to communicate. And the unobserved mind is the ego. It's where the ego comes from. It's that identification with mind, or it's that it's the mind's identification with things, and beliefs and ideas and conditioning and our past and and all the things that the mind identifies with, our addictions, our resistances, all of those things. And so when we use our mind to communicate, of course, that it's where we're using that, we're not using the subconscious. The spiritual energy can't speak, so it's a challenge. And I think that's why it's a practice, is to not judge it as bad when, when our ego does surface, but just to observe it and to become aware of it. And if we do that, and if we practice that, if we practice becoming aware of the ego, the movie character, the false self, then the amount of times that it appears, the frequency increases between the amount of times that it appears, and the spike becomes less severe. You know, the intensity of that appearance becomes less severe. So you're decreasing the spike and you're increasing the space between the appearances. So that's why I think it's a practice, and it's that practice of self-awareness and that understanding of self-awareness and what it means to be self-aware. I feel like that's, one of the awakenings that can happen with the proper use of some of these medicines that you're talking about. And, I guess in addition to that, how else would you describe the awakening process, and what does that mean to you?
I believe that awakening is beginning to question everything that, you can start by how you felt when you realized that the Easter Bunny wasn't real and Santa Claus, you've been lied to that, right? Start questioning everything, questioning everything from why certain things are in our foods, why certain things are in our water, why certain things have been taught to us by church leaders, government leaders, everything. Just question it all. Question, are we really alone in this universe, right? All of these things that innately inside you're like, no, there's no way. Of course we're not. So why are they hiding it from us, right? Why? Start asking those things. Get curious like you were when you were a kid. Don't just allow yourself to be into this state of numbness. The truth is we're being conditioned by our algorithms. The AI that's here is, we've had AI controlling us for a long time based on the algorithms that are showing up, and it's super smart. It knows when we're getting sad, when we're getting depressed, and the reality is you have to have a certain amount of time where you're not thinking about anything. You don't have all that stimulation in order for things from your short-term memory to go into your long-term memory. So if you're completely bombarded all day long with stuff happening all the time, then you start realizing, wow, I'm having a certain degree of amnesia from some of the things in my life. Do you know why? Is because the mind wasn't meant to have this constant stimulation, and we're being led, we're being guided by this propaganda, whichever way this system wants to take us. So taking some time every single day to put away the phone, to monitor your screen time on your social media, monitor your screen time on all of the things that are triggering and feeding you information, so that you can start saying, no, I'm going to take back what is mine. I'm going to take back my sovereignty. I'm going to take back my ability to maintain my long-term memories. I am going to start tuning into something outside of that big lie. I truly believe that the last 10,000 years of deceit will pale in comparison to the deceit that is coming. With the ability of AI to create deep fakes in every way, we won't be able to trust the videos we watch, the audios we listen to. The only thing that we're going to be able to trust is this, right? So we need to learn how to start listening to it, period. If we can't start turning everything off, tuning into that stillness from within, then we will be deceived in a way that you can't even imagine. And we will be taken down this road of deception to the point where we will be enslaved more than we ever have been.
Love it. So true. And, I guess, and I'd like your kind of perspective on how this works from a tangible standpoint as well. But in order to make that connection in order to create mindfulness and to unplug from that phone and from this matrix that we're living in, it's that people, I think, sometimes feel like they need to learn how to do yoga and go into a dark room and have a specific song on and, meditate for hours and hours on end. think it can be a lot more simple than that in order to experience moments of mindfulness and moments of just, true self-awareness, and to calm the overstimulation that exists within your mind on a constant basis from being plugged into the matrix and into our phones all day long. And it's simply the observation of mind. And it's that knowing that there are two entities. You've got like you say, you've got your conscious mind, you've got your subconscious mind. It's the unconscious mind and the spiritual self. If that spiritual self can observe the mind, that creates instant separation from overstimulation, and it just allows you to unplug from the matrix, even just for a moment. And that is so healthy from an overstimulation standpoint. And that is meditation. When you are observing your mind, well, then your mind is no longer in control. It's no longer the unobserved, mind that's running your reality. It's no longer creating this underlying turbulence that we all experience and feel throughout the day. And so just that one moment of breaking up that day-long turbulence that we can feel through observation of self, observation of mind, it doesn't have to be 10 minutes. It doesn't have to be an hour. It can be walking from your car into your home, or from your car into your office building, or taking a walk outside, and just connecting with the present moment through observation of your mind is just so critical in order to really just, be connected with the ether, with reality itself, and to give your mind a break just from a mental health standpoint. So just hearing you talk, it's I like to take things and kind of make them tangible, so that there can be a practice that we can do. And it's really that saying, it's taking a breath as your mind is judging everything, and attempting to remain in control, and taking that breath and observing the judgment, observing the reactivity, observing the thinking, the constant stream of thought. It's like there's the difference between the person on the side of the road in a busy city who's mumbling to themselves all day and talking to themselves about things. The difference between that person and the rest of us is that it comes out of their mouth verbally. They're saying it out loud. They're speaking it, whereas us, we're just closing our mouth and keeping it quiet and keeping it in our heads. So, but it's that unobserved mind, and that breaking of that stream of unconsciousness is so critical for self-realization and for calm and for peace.
For me, I do two very, very simple things. I close my eyes for a second just to remove all the visual stimuli, and I slow my breath way down. I do a breath in through my nose. And that breath in through the nose needs to last at least 4 seconds. Our regular breaths are maybe 1 or 2 seconds, varying, but at least a 4-second in, and at least a 4 to 6 second out. And just that breath alone, because of the practice of meditation that I do, and I get myself into that state, and a longer state in the mornings and the evenings in meditation. During the day, I can get myself out of that chatter box and into that spirit box. Years ago, I had a mentor that said that the most valuable piece of real estate you'll ever own is the 6 inches between your ears. So I was like studying books and everything else. I truly believe that it's not the 6 inches between your ears. The longest road you'll ever travel is the one between your head and your heart. But once you get to that space, that leading from a place of the heart. When I say the heart, that's your spirit self, right? That's the and observing and not reacting. You're saying, okay, well, that's interesting. That's interesting that I jumped at that comment. What was it about me at that point? And separating myself from that ego and making those observations from a quiet place of the heart is something where I recognize, okay, that doesn't have to define me. That doesn't have to be me. I did that in our conversation here. I took a breath and I recognized, oh, wow, there were a couple things here, because I was trying to recognize where it was coming from. I was looking at it separately. I'm like, okay, because of the fact that Matt is a 4th generation, ultra wealthy, whatever, there was something inside of me that wanted to make sure that he knew that I was successful too. Why was that still important to me, right? it was an interesting observation that I was having about me with you being a different interviewer than others that I have been on. And so by separating that spirit self and making an observation of the ego self, it allows us to make the adjustments when we need to. And I started using these on even some of the child rescue missions. I remember one where we were in Ecuador, and the head of the federal police was there with us, and we were following up on a bunch of leads. We were driving in the unmarked van. I had me and some of my operators that were in there, and he said, okay, there was a place. It was a spa that was a front for some massage thing in the back, and the massage was, selling minors, et cetera. And so we drive, and then he's like, oh shit. We said, what? He goes, oh, it's shut down. We got this lead a month ago. They've already shut down. They must have got word that we were on to them. And there was nobody there. And I said, no, stop. He says, stop. No, they're gone. I said, no, stop. I can feel it. And it was just that twinge in my heart that said there was still something there. Right? So he stopped the van, Green Beret, Petter gets out, opens the door for me and Andy and Jimmy, and we get out, and I walk around the back of the van. I look up and down, I close my eyes, take a deep breath in, hold it for a second, and a deep breath out, just to move it from all of this chatter into that spirit self. And immediately I could feel a strong interest in going into a restaurant that was to the left, a couple doors down. So I walk into this restaurant, walk up to the manager, just say, hey, there's supposed to be a massage place here somewhere. I can't find it. He says, do you have an appointment? Freaking knew that place is still there, right? I said, no, I don't. He goes, oh, I don't want to talk anything about it. I freaking knew it was there. So I walk out in front, and I do the same thing. Close my eyes. Deep breath in, hold it for a second, deep breath out, moving out of the chatter mind into the spirit self. Opened my eyes, looked around, and just waiting for something to feel. And that voice of peace came as soon as I saw this lady that was walking her dog. Walked over to this lady, said, hey, can you help me with something? I kind of lied at this point. I said, I have an appointment for a massage, a place. I have no idea where it is. It's supposed to be here. She looks at me. I'm dressed like one of those guys, right? I've got a hat that says Effers upside down on it. I've got this big chain. I've got a shirt that has a picture of a doctor on it that says, I'm no gynecologist, but I'll take a look, right? This is the kind of, she looks at me up and down and she goes, So she makes a phone call. And sure enough, 2 minutes later, this madam come down, opens these two steel doors, welcomes us in. We walk up and pinpoint the location. Ended up making a big arrest there with 12 kids. And so, but that wouldn't have happened if we had kept driving, if I hadn't been tuning in and listening. And that's something that, even in building my company, when I started recognizing that if I was looking through my list and just working out of my conscious mind, I would get decent results because I worked my butt off. But if I did that and did what I called the multiplier effect, did that, close my eyes, feel into it, and just energetically realize that the truth is there. Once you've identified where you want to go, here's the crazy thing. If your goal is to have a private yacht with 70, supermodels on it, the universe doesn't care. We sit here and think that, I have to only have righteous goals for God to bless my efforts. No, the universe will come together and create what your dominant thoughts are. This is why it's important, guys, that you don't get, if you're in a healthy marriage, quote unquote healthy marriage, and you're looking at pornography every night, your subconscious mind thinks that you're already cheating, right? And it will navigate you towards situations that will break apart your marriage, right? So whatever it is, just decide what it is, visualize it, hold on to it, close your eyes, and things will happen. In fact, I have an awesome story. You're going to love this one. So years ago, I was, this was 35 years ago. My first wife, her name was Tiffany. Tiffany was a model for McCarty's. They do the swimsuit issue of Sports Illustrated. So, she was super skinny. She was a dancer at the university dance team, etc. We got in a major car accident a month before we got married. She broke her pelvic bone. She couldn't exercise, couldn't dance. Started gaining weight. Went well over 200 pounds. Got pregnant with our twins, got pregnant with our third little boy. At 29 years old, I had sold my anxiety company. We were doing okay. I was doing some mentoring. She's 29 years old. She's 230 pounds. So she started just over 100 pounds, right? 230 pounds. I told these young entrepreneurs, you can be anything you can imagine in your life. I said, if time and money were no issue, what would you dream? This is your dominant dream, whatever it is you want. If time and money were no issue, what would you dream? And so we were driving home after that. And she said, Paul, I want to do something great with my life. I said, I turned to her, I said, Tiffany, if time and money were no issue, what would you dream? She said, you're going to laugh at me. I said, I will not. She said, since I was a little girl, I wanted to be an NFL cheerleader. I look at my 230-pound wife. I'm like, you go, girl. Okay. And she goes, I realized she was serious. She danced at a San Francisco 49ers Gold Rush cheerleader thing when she was 14 years old. She saw all these girls. She thought that would be awesome. So for Christmas that year, this was December, for a couple of weeks later at Christmas, I had gone online. I found a San Francisco 49ers cheerleader who had hair like Tiffany, but of course her body and everything else was different. And I put Tiffany's face on it with Adobe Photoshop. I put at the bottom, Tiffany Hutchinson, San Francisco 49ers Gold Rush cheerleader. I framed it. I gave it to her for Christmas. She starts crying. She puts it on her bedstand. Every single night before she went to bed, she took that, she stared at it, she closed her eyes for at least 2 minutes, visualizing, bringing that energy in. Every single morning before we woke up, before she got out of bed, she would take that picture, she would stare at it, visualize it. She went from 230 plus pounds down to just over 100 pounds. She started exercising between 2 to 3 hours a day, every single day. Ryan, pull up Tiffany Hutchinson, type 49ers cheerleader. There was 500 girls trying out for the 49ers that year. 500 girls. There was 3 spots available, and she was the first pick.
Wow.
She was the only girl that was over 25 years old. You lived in Utah. She was a mother of 3. She was 230 pounds. Inside Edition did a whole piece on her. Called it Tiffany's Triumph. Flew their whole team out and did her before pictures with all these, big fat clothes and the after pictures, etc. So, the key is that literally we can create anything we want in our life. Just decide what it is. And then once we do, the forces of the universe will start coming together to conspire for us. There was a book written years ago called, almost 100 years ago, called The Science of Getting Rich, that was kind of the granddaddy of all of the self-development stuff that we see today. And in it talks about how there's a thinking stuff in which all things are created throughout the universe, and that we can interact with that through our dominant thoughts and start bringing into reality everything that we want in our life. Whether it's, hey, I want to invest in a movie and create a global movement to fight child trafficking, or whether it's I want to build a multi-billion-dollar company, or whether it's I want to be an NFL cheerleader and I'm 230 pounds and I'm a mother of 3 and I'm 30 years old. Whatever it is, we can create it in our life if we decide that's what we want.
Love it. Wow, that's a powerful story. We can absolutely manifest whatever we want to manifest. No doubt about it. That's one of those kind of enduring mysteries of life, and like, how does that actually work? And like, what is it? Is it, like Schumann Resonance again, or how does that actually work? Because, it's absolutely you can manifest whatever you want. Good. So, I wanted to ask you just about a couple of things maybe before we call it a day, because I know you got to get out of here not too long. But the shifting gears to the P. Diddy thing and the Jeffrey Epstein thing, I guess maybe we start with Epstein. I was curious, the tweet from Elon Musk about that, and just,
I didn't see that tweet. Tell me what it is, because I know a lot about the Epstein thing.
He said that Bill Clinton was on the list.
Oh, for sure he was.
Yeah. So,
that's super. Yeah, everybody known that for decades. Okay. We all suspected it.
For him to come out and say it was... oh, there it is. Yeah, thank you, Ryan.
Yeah.
Time to drop a really big bomb.
And Donald was there. Yeah, here's the thing. Here's the thing. I'm just going to say, just because you were on a plane and because you were there doesn't mean that you partook on everything.
Right.
However, if you wanted to rise the ranks and become a senator, you wanted to become a president, you want to become a prime minister, you want to become any of those things. Sadly, we live in a world where there's a lot of very, very, very powerful entities who are really pulling the strings. Okay. If you wanted to control the votes of a federal judge, of a senator, forever, you wanted to control their votes forever, you get them on film with a 12-year-old in an Epstein Island. That controls them forever. And I'm not just saying that this is, I'm just going to drop this just as something for people to take a look at. It may not be a 3-letter agency. It may be an agency working with a 3-letter agency, but this agency comes from our little teeny country in the Middle East that everybody is trying to fight against, right? There may be controls, global controls over U.S. politicians, and you know it. You have somebody that you helped get into office, and they had all these promises, and they were so excited and whatever else, and 6 months or a year or 2 years later, all of a sudden they flip, and you're like, wait a minute. That's not in America's best interest. That's not in our state's best interest. That's not. Wonder why they flipped. I wonder why they're going down this road. Could it be that there's some blackmail on them somewhere? Could it be that there's blackmail on one of their kids somewhere? Yes, and yes. Sadly, we live in a world where if you are rising the ranks to become a powerful influencer in any way, whether it's in Hollywood, whether it's in government, if you're rising those ranks, if they can't put those hooks in you so that they can control you when they want to, then they're going to do things to derail your road to wherever you're trying to go. So whether he kind of bucked the system, because I think there's most of the other people were supposed to win, and he didn't, or whether those hooks and controls are there, I absolutely guarantee that there are hooks and controls in every single federal judge, federal senator, congressman, and all the way up to the very top in our country and others. And so the real question is that people say, okay, I'm just going to do whatever you say, or I'm just going to F the system and say, screw you guys. This is why I'm super open about everything. People want to look me up. Yeah. This is why I said right here on your very thing, when I was talking about the psychedelics, I felt in every cell in my body the pain that my kids felt when I cheated on their mom. It's out there, right? There's nothing people can have on me. I'm a fully open book on everything because I know how the system works. And I know that if I'm going to try to take down the people who are really involved in child trafficking, then I have to be beyond a position where they can control me in that way.
How do you think that AI impacts this whole conversation? Because if you've got, you don't, the person doesn't even have to go to the island, to Jeff Epstein's island. If AI is going to create an image of him with some 12-year-old girl, and then how does AI impact this whole thing?
Well, and that's what I was saying earlier. I believe that the greatest deception of all time is coming with what AI can do, and we literally aren't going to be able to trust anything. Now, what it's going to do is it's going to make it so that some of these guys who really have been F-tards, right, and screwed up in some pretty dark ways, they can easily be able to say, oh, that wasn't me. That was AI generated, right? Yeah, you can have a video of me effing a goat, but that's all AI generated. Because if we as the general public have access to creating the deep fake videos that we can do, can you imagine the deep fakes that can be created by those who have had this technology for decades, right? So
yeah, no doubt about it. Do you think that star witness that was said to have committed suicide,
committed suicide?
Yeah. Do you think there's anything there? What was her name?
There was absolute. What was her name? Started with a V. Vicky.
Ryan
anyway,
will find
yeah,
it.
I remember. Yeah,
Virginia.
There she was, Virginia. Yeah. Dies by suicide, her family says. Yeah, this is BS.
Yeah.
She said just recently, like a few weeks before, hey, listen, I'm not suicidal. I'm coming out with this stuff. Just like Jeffrey Epstein wasn't suicidal either, right? He didn't commit suicide. Anybody that thinks he did is living under a rock, right? He was going to come out with things that very next day. Now, whether he didn't commit suicide and was taken out by some pretty high-level people, or whether it was a faked death and he was somewhere else, I don't know. It just depends on who's really, really in control, you know? If the guys who are in control are like I think they are, you know, and this stuff goes all the way back. Here, there's a book called Pawns in the Game, written like in the early 90s, that talks about the dark energies of promises made by people like Baron Rothschild in saying, I'm going to enslave humanity through finance and banking and everything else in exchange for, you know, my family being able to have, and that World War I was planned, World War II was planned. Here's the thing, you know, all of these wars, these divisions, there's more people that have been killed in the name of God than anything. You know, even the stuff that's going on in the Middle East right now. Really, this goes back thousands of years, because one guy, Abraham, has a wife that can't have a kid, so he has a son with her handmaiden, and then his wife has a kid. Right now, he's got 2 boys, and they're all fighting over the birthright. The birthright. God loves certain people more than others. That's bullshit, right? I'm just going to say it right now. That the fact that a certain group of people, because of who their great-great-great-great-great-grandfather was, all of a sudden gets the blessings of God versus others, and it justifies you throwing nukes at each other? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? This is what's wrong with the world, right? So we have to get past all this dogma. We have to get past all these divisions and get to a place where we recognize the divinity in each of us individually. Together, it doesn't matter what skin color we have. It doesn't matter what religion we are. It doesn't matter what our gender is. None of that matters. We're all one. We're all connected. We're all unified in this beautiful, energetic world that we're creating together. And so,
yeah.
Anyway, we go down
do you view these divisions and these separations as illusions, essentially? I mean, like these, it's mind identification, right?
Is.
With a race, with a nationality,
it's deceptive illusions.
Yeah.
It's put in place on purpose by deception, but they're all illusions, all of it.
Right.
Yeah.
And that in and of itself, I think, again, if we're trying to get tangible and figure out how do we unite as a species, it's that recognition of how self-labeling and the labeling of others and self-identification with things like a political party, a nationality, a race, a religion, like how it all divides us into all these separate groups, and how those groups then become combative, and they're defending their version of the truth based on their beliefs, and then so they're identified, and so there's the other group, and that's the enemy, and it's all this fighting, and it's this endless war. I think it's the recognition of these mind-made separate illusions that are ultimately going to bring us together. I mean, you go out into space, there's no country lines, you know, there's no separation. It's just it's the human species living together with other plants and animals.
Exactly.
So I think it's got to be that knowing, right?
I love the story of the man that's sitting on a couch and he's reading the newspaper, and his little boy walks in. His little boy says, "Daddy, I want to play baseball." He's like, "No, you know, I'm busy right now." Comes back a little bit later. Dad, can we play baseball now? And he turns the page of the newspaper and he sees this map of the world, all the countries. He takes out that map and he tears it up in little teeny pieces of paper and he throws it on the floor. He says, "Son, you need to learn your geography. I want you to take every single country and tape them all together exactly perfectly. If you do that, I'll go out and play baseball with you." Thinking it's going to take hours. A few minutes later, the little boy comes back and it's taped together perfectly. And the man said, how did you do that? And the little boy said, he turns it over. He says, "Well, there was a picture of a man on the other side. I just put the man together and the whole world came together." And that's really the answer. You know, we're trying to figure out we just need to look at the man in the mirror. What do we need to do? And, I use the example of tension transfer. You go to work, you're out of integrity, you yell at your employee, and then he goes home, yells at his wife, she yells at the son kicks the dog, right? Literally, the kicking of that dog came from you. That was tension transfer that came from you, right? Now, let's pretend that I go to work, and what I don't realize is that man, let's say that he had been severely abused as a child, sexually abused and other things, right? Let's say that he made a whole bunch of bad decisions throughout his life, and he got addicted to pornography, and that continued to progress where now he was starting to look at rape videos or child pornography, whatever. Let's say that he was using alcohol just to satisfy this empty hole in his world, right? Let's say that his wife just left him because of his alcohol addiction and other things. And let's say that this is the weekend that his 12-year-old daughter and her cousin comes over. Now, the tension transfer of me being out of integrity, of me yelling at that employee at work, literally, instead of it kicking a dog, that tension transfer hurt a child, right? Every one of us, if we're going to help humanity come together, if we're going to help heal humanity, if we're going to elevate that global consciousness, if we're going to make it so our kids and our great-grandchildren never have to go through the pain that millions of kids are going through today, it starts with looking at the man in the mirror. It starts with every one of us taking accountability for who we are, how we're showing up in the world, what addictions, problems, other things that we need to release, coming from that place of the unconscious space into that place of the spirit, looking at that from that point of view where we can start being an observer, not identifying with it, where we can realize the connectivity that we have with every human on earth and all of the intelligences of the universe, all that together. We do that, we will save millions of children.
Beautiful. Well said. Yeah. Well, let's kind of maybe close it out with like, what is next for you? What do you have coming up next?
Well, I have this book. We showed it a little bit. This is The Sound of Freedom book. It's coming out July 29th. Beyond the movie. Oh, there it is. I'm showing the middle one. So beyond the movie, where it just has a few of the child rescue missions, this has got detailed information on things that the parents can do to keep their children safe. This has got stuff that we can do as humanity to heal ourselves, to heal humanity so that this isn't a problem moving forward in the future. You can go to liberatinghumanity.com. I'm on all social media as all just Liberating Humanity. On TikTok and Instagram, Facebook, etc. is Liberating Humanity. And then go to liberatinghumanity.com. You can pre-order the book, or if this is after July 29th, you can go on to Amazon and get it there. On liberatinghumanity.com, you can also get information on how to keep your family safe, hand-to-hand combat things, situational awareness stuff, and information on the retreats and how you can explore different ways to help heal yourself, heal your family, so that we can all show up from that place of the heart.
Love it. Love it. Excellent. Well, this has been one of the most fun and enlightening and memorable conversations that I've had so far on the podcast. I really appreciate your perspective and the knowledge that you bring to the world. And of course, the work that you do is, it's incredible. It's you're making a true difference in the world. And I'm just honored to have met you and to have connected and to have had you on the podcast. And so,
thank you, Matt.
Yeah,
I will say this. Back at the time of Abraham Lincoln, it wasn't guys like me. It was guys like you that created the difference. It was, people like Harriet Beecher Stowe. She was an author, wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin, similar to your podcast, right? Created an awareness with good people of what was really going on in the South. In fact, years later, when Abraham Lincoln met Harriet, he shook her hand. He said, "So you're the little lady that wrote the book that started the big war." So Matt, you are the person that is creating awareness, that is opening people's minds so they can understand how much more the universe has to offer than what they're seeing in their little 3D world. And I'm incredibly grateful for you sharing me, trusting me with this time with your audience today. Very, very grateful for that. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, appreciate it very much. And thank you so much for your time as well. And Ryan, thank you so much, sir. This has been amazing. It's been amazing to chat with you. So we'll wrap it with that. Good.
Excellent.
Good stuff, man.
Thank you.
Amazing.
I appreciate you.
Yeah.